I'm Garrick Francis. This is the Inheritance to Income podcast, where we help families, founders, and leaders move from legacy by default to legacy by design. If you're building something for the next generation and you're not sure what comes next, you're in the right place. I'm your legacy advocate. Let's talk about it. Retirement is an interesting word. At its root, it carries the idea of withdrawal, to retreat, to step back, to leave the field, to move out of the active place where you've been. And for a long time, that's how many of us were taught to think about it. You work for 20, 30, 40, lots of people 50 years. You pay your bills, you raise your children, you build your career, you build your reputation and your identity. And you save what you can. You do all the responsible things. And then one day you retire. It's a celebration. You withdraw. You step away. You stop. But I think that story is way too small. It's not completely wrong. It's just incomplete. Because if you have spent decades building wisdom and relationships and skills and judgment, resilience and faith and experience and resources, talents, why in the world would the next chapter be defined by withdrawal? Why would the next chapter be defined by stepping aside? Why would the next chapter be shaped only by what you're leaving behind? That just doesn't make sense to me. So legacy design asks, I think, a much better question. Not just, what am I retiring from? But instead, it asks, what am I stepping into? And that's what I want to talk about today. Because, retirement means withdraw. It does. I mean, if you look it up, it means withdraw. But legacy means deploy. Now, let me be clear from the beginning. This is not an argument against retirement. It's not an argument against rest. It's not an argument against leisure, kicking back, enjoying life. It's not an argument against stepping away from a job that's taking a toll on your body or your spirit or your family or your health, your mind. Lots of people, lots of us need rest. Some people need recovery. Some people need to just stop carrying roles that were never meant to define them forever. There's a simple dignity in rest. There's a wisdom in slowing down. There's time to stop doing what you've been doing for so long. But stopping one thing doesn't mean you're done. Stepping away from a role doesn't mean you're stepping away from your purpose. Leaving a job doesn't mean leaving behind contribution. And certainly ending one chapter, ending many chapters, doesn't mean the next chapter should be lived by default. And that's the myth that I challenge. The old retirement story prepared people to stop working for that moment, for that day, for that gold watch. It didn't always prepare them to keep living with purpose. And that's where so many people get stuck. For decades, the retirement story was pretty simple. You work hard, you save, you pay off the house, you raise the children, maybe you build a business, maybe you build a career, maybe you build a solid reputation. Then retire and enjoy yourself. Sail off into the sunset. And again, there's nothing wrong with that enjoyment. You've earned it. But many people reach that season and discover something they didn't expect. They have a financial plan, but they don't have a life design. They have savings, but not a structure. Retirement is often sold as freedom. But for many people, the first feeling in retirement is not freedom. It's disorientation, because work has been doing more than paying bills for 30 years or 40 years. Work has been giving them day-to-day structure. It's been giving that person a language, a community. It's been giving them an identity. It's been giving them a reason to be needed, to get out of bed every morning and to go do something important. And then one day that role is just gone. The calendar opens up, the inbox gets quiet, the phone rings less, and lots of people are asking, who am I now? That's why this conversation is so important. That's why this conversation really matters, because the old retirement story says you're free now. But legacy design asks more. Free to do and be what? That is the better question. Free for what? Who needs your wisdom? Who needs your attention? Who needs your resources, the skills that you have learned over the years, that you've employed, that you've designed, that you've developed? What should your resources make possible? And the question is, what part of you has been waiting for room to breathe? What part of you has been waiting to expand? What wings have you been waiting to unfurl? So the question is, what are you stepping into? They have time, but they don't have direction because it hasn't been designed. They have experience and wisdom, but no clear place to deploy it and to use it and to seed it. And that wisdom that they have spent so much time developing, there's no channel now to pass it forward. In the workplace, there were some defined structures, places where you gave and poured. But in retirement, sometimes those things fall by the wayside. In retirement, you have resources. You've worked all of your life to garner those resources. But the deeper question now is, what's it all for? What is all of this for now? And that's where a certain kind of drift begins. Not because people failed, and certainly not because they were irresponsible, or not because they were taking things as serious as they needed to. And certainly it wasn't because they didn't work hard, because they did every day for 40 years. But it's really because they were prepared to accumulate all of these things. They were prepared. They spent time, with their retirement, with their investments, with their standard operating procedures at work. But they weren't always ready and prepared to deploy. And this is where the legacy deployment gap comes back into play. This is when we really are starting to trying to figure out what comes next. If you heard the earlier episode on the legacy deployment gap, you know how I define that gap. It's the gap between what was accumulated and what is meaningfully deployed into family, life, stewardship, what carries forward? And retirement exposes that gap, because after decades of building, the question changes. It's no longer only how much have I saved. The question becomes, what's the money for now? What is all I have done supposed to do? What is its purpose? How do I use this wisdom? What is my time for? What are these relationships that I've built supposed to engage? What are these experiences supposed to teach someone, especially the next generation? What should what I have built make possible for others? These are different conversations. These aren't just retirement planning questions. These are legacy design questions, because accumulation, thankfully, gives you options. Deployment gives those options meaning and purpose. I think for some people, the first year after stepping away from this full-time work maybe should be treated like a gap year. Not a gap year to disappear, and certainly not a gap year to drift, and not a gap year to become invisible. But it's a design year. It's a planning year. It's a deployment year. A year to pause, but to reflect. A year to recover and to plan. A year to listen. A year to ask better questions. A year to develop, and certainly a year to design. A year to begin deploying what you built with such great intention. Because if you don't design that next chapter, you don't need to step into it. You drift into it. And drift is not a legacy design. It's default. Drift is what happens when the calendar changes but the purpose doesn't get clarified. And drift happens when the work ends, but you don't build a new rhythm to your life. Drift is what happens when your identity was attached to the role and the office and the company and the organization, and nobody asks what identity looks like now. Who are you? So this season requires design, not pressure, not panic, not overbuilding, but careful design. If this conversation is already making you think of someone, maybe yourself, a parent, a founder, a leader, a friend, share it with them. And if these conversations are helping you think differently about legacy and responsibility and what comes next, please hit the like and subscribe button. It certainly helps this message travel to more families, founders, and leaders who are trying to move from legacy by default to legacy by design. Now, let's keep going. There are two distinct groups of people I want to speak to. First, if you're planning retirement, this is the time to get that plan in place. Not just financially, but relationally and spiritually and practically and generationally, if I can say that. Physically, emotionally, vocationally. What comes next? This is time to ask, what am I stepping away from? And what am I stepping into? What relationships need extra attention? What wisdom needs to be transferred? And how do I do that? What stories need to be preserved? What responsibilities need to be clarified? What resources do I have that need to be deployed? What conversations have I avoided? What unaccustomed conversations have I been avoiding? What decisions should I stop delaying as I do this planning? And what do I want this chapter to make possible? Don't wait until that structure disappears that you have today to start designing the next structure. No one sells a home while they're still designing the next one. Plan before the gap opens, but the second group is just as important. If you've already stepped away, if you've already retired or already in the next season, it's not too late. This is still the time to redesign. No shame, no scolding, no you missed the opportunity. Maybe you stepped away from the old role but never fully stepped into that next chapter. Maybe the first season felt like rest, but now it feels like drift. Maybe you stayed busy but not deeply engaged. Maybe your calendar feels full, but your soul doesn't. Maybe you preserved everything but deployed very little. Maybe you still have lots of wisdom, time, relationship, resources that have not yet been meaningfully put into motion in the next season. Then the invitation is the same. The invitation, the opportunity, is to redesign. You can still ask, what is mine to give now? What would it mean to live more fully? What must I steward while I'm still here? Who needs my wisdom? Who needs my encouragement? Who needs to hear and know my story? Who needs access to what I've learned? Who can I pass it down to? What should I stop preserving out of fear and start deploying with great intention? If you're planning your retirement, plan. If you're already in retirement, redesign. Either way, don't drift. Plan before the gap opens. Redesign before drift hardens. But now I want to pause for a quick word about our sponsor. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Inheritance to Income. Inheritance to Income is brought to you by Garrick Francis Studios. Whether you're preserving something for the future or creating something for today, photography, videography, and editing. Check out the link in the show notes below or check garrickfrancisstudios.com. So, now, back to our conversation. Again, retire means withdraw. Legacy means deploy. So as we think about those things, legacy is really held in our stories, in our actions, in our voices, in the things that we want to see continue. So we want to try and focus on how do we step into that next season? How do we step into this purpose? How do we continue to move forward? And so when we do that, I think about this in terms of two mountains. The first mountain is familiar to many people. David Brooks in his book called The Second Mountain. The first mountain is earning, proving yourself, surviving, climbing the business or corporate ladder. It's building, it's paying the bills, it's raising the children, the college funds, the competitions, all of the different things that people need to go through. It's making a name for yourself. It's creating stability for your family. It's becoming someone people can truly count on day by day by day. And scaling that mountain matters. It's not small. For many people, that first mountain took everything they had. Their energy, their money, their sacrifice. They delayed gratification. They stayed in jobs they didn't really love. They carried families and responsibilities. They built businesses, 10-hour, 12-hour days. They kept going when stopping would have been easier. So this is not about dismissing the first mountain. The first mountain built the life you live. But the second mountain asks a different question. The second mountain asks, what will that life now make possible? The first mountain may have been about building a life for you and for your family. The second mountain is about deploying that life and all the things you've learned along the journey. And that is where the meaning changes. That's where the work becomes less about proving and more about pouring. Less about proving and more about pouring. Less about accumulating and more about aligning. Less about being the center and more about preparing others. Less about control and more about stewardship. You don't climb the second mountain by withdrawing, by retiring. You climb it by asking what your life is now meant to be, to become, to make possible. Some people don't need to retire from work as much as they need to redesign their assignment. And that distinction truly matters, because work is not the enemy. Purposeful work is a gift. Contribution is life-giving. Building can be meaningful. Paying the bills matters. Serving can keep a person connected. Mentoring gives shape to wisdom. The problem isn't work. The problem is being trapped in a role that no longer fits while never designing the role that should come next. Maybe the assignment changes. Maybe the pace changes. Maybe it slows down. For some, it may speed up. Maybe the audience changes, who you're talking to, who you're pouring into. Maybe the form changes. Maybe the role changes from operator and boss, CEO, to advisor, from decision maker to developer of decision makers, from provider to preparer, from builder to steward, from center of the system, a source of wisdom for the system, to someone who holds it up. This is not withdrawal. That is what we say is redesign. That's why I love the phrase. We spend decades paying bills, but the next chapter demands that we ask what will pay our soul. This isn't soft. It's not sentimental. It's real. Because a person can be financially comfortable and still be spiritually restless. A person can have more free time and still feel unanchored. A person can have a paid off house, a retirement account, paid off car notes, a clean calendar, and still wonder, what do I do now? What matters now? Where do I belong now? Who needs me now? What is mine to do now? Those are not financial questions. They're design questions. And they matter because freedom without purpose can become drift. Comfort without meaning can become emptiness. My mother used to say something in her own way that has stayed with me. And it stayed with me late in her life when she was 97 years old. She built a house when she was 93. And she stayed busy because she didn't want to make time for death on her calendar. It could sound funny, and in a way it was, but underneath it was really something deeper. Mom still had a purpose. Mom still had motion. Mom still had people to care about, not just those who cared about her. She still had reasons to keep moving. Mama didn't want life to collapse into waiting. And there's a quiet wisdom in that. But I want to be careful here too. The goal is not just to stay busy. There's a kind of busyness that really is just avoidance. There's this kind of busyness that fills the calendar, but doesn't feed the soul, if you know what I'm talking about. There's a kind of business that keeps you moving so you don't have time to ask the deeper questions and contemplate purpose. That's not what I'm talking about. The goal here is not to stay busy. The goal is to stay meaningful, to stay meaningfully engaged. There's a difference between activity and purpose. And there's a difference between motion and meaning. A full calendar is not the same as a full life. Purpose keeps the soul in motion. That is what we're really after, not the noise, not the frenzy, not proving that you still matter. That's first mountain stuff. But staying connected to what gives life meaning. That's what we want to step into. Now, one of the reasons this retirement myth is so dangerous is that it comes with a set of assumptions. People assume the money will be enough. They assume the house will be there if they need it to bear all things. They assume they can always go back to work if necessary. They assume the children will figure it out. They assume they know what to do when the time comes. But assumptions are not design. And later in life, assumptions can become very expensive and very costly. And those are different things. Take the house. For many families, the house is the largest asset. It may hold decades of equity. It may carry memory and meaning for generations. It may represent ultimate sacrifice. But the house isn't automatically a plan. Home equity is not the same as home readiness. If the house has deferred maintenance, or rising taxes, or rising insurance, accessibility challenges, outdated systems, emotional resistance to change, it may not function as the safety net people have expected. The house may be valuable on paper, but may be difficult to use when the family actually needs options. That's why I say the house is not the plan. The plan is what the house is designed to make possible. The house is not the plan. The plan is what the house is designed to make possible. Does it support aging? Does it support care? Does it support mobility? Does it support family access or giving or liquidity? Does it support peace of mind? Does it support the next chapter? The office where you give out wisdom. A home is not a legacy strategy by itself just because it has equity. It becomes part of the legacy design when the family understands what it should make possible. The same is true with work. We talked about it. The just keep working may be part of a plan, but it can't be the plan because working longer on the first mountain only works if things cooperate. We've talked about it before. Your health has to cooperate. Your energy, your opportunity, the market demand, the skills with new technologies, transportation, location, family responsibilities, all these things have to continue to work out. Desire and the body's ability to keep doing what the mind still wants to do. These are all things that we have to deal with. So some people will work longer by choice. They'll stay on the first mountain, and that's okay. Some should. Some will do meaningful work well into later life, and that can be a beautiful thing. And purpose can even change in the workplace or in the business if you shift your role. But if working longer is the only backup plan, then that plan is really fragile. Because life doesn't always ask permission before it changes the schedule. The health events can come, the caregiving needs come, jobs can end on purpose or abruptly. A market can shift, a business can change, a spouse may need care, a child may need care. A body can say no before the mind is ready. So again, assumptions are not design. Legacy builders don't just assume the future will cooperate. They prepare for what matters. They prepare to continue even if circumstances change. They plan for change. There's also another part of this I want to name. Some voices talk about retirement mainly through the lens of what rich people do, how the wealthy think, how they keep working, how they keep investing, how they keep building. And there's something to learn there. There's a lot to learn. But that's not my main focus. My focus is legacy builders. Anyone can be a legacy builder, not just rich people, not just wealthy people. Legacy builders, people who may have wealth, people who may have a business, people may have property, people may have influence, People may have wisdom. People may have family counting on them. People who may have lived enough to know what the next chapter, to know that the next chapter should not be wasted. This is not about performing wealth. This is about deploying legacy. It's about asking, what did I build and what did I build it for? Who needs to be prepared and what's possible for the next generation? What should be given? How should I live? What must be stewarded? That's the lane I want you to think about. Legacy builders aren't simply trying to keep score. They're trying to make what they built matter for generations. And this brings us to what I call the practical side of this episode. 3 things: give, live, steward. Those are the 3 lanes of deployment. Not live, give, steward. This is intentional. Give, live, steward. That order really matters, because giving reminds us that the chapter is not only about self, that the next chapter is not only about self-comfort. Living reminds us that this chapter is not only about sacrifice, it's about continuing to move forward. And stewardship reminds us that this chapter is not only about the present, it's about preparing for future generations. Give, live, steward. Purpose, experience, continuity. So first, give. Ask, what should I build make possible for others? Who can benefit from this wisdom? Who needs this encouragement? Who needs an introduction? Who needs mentoring? Who needs support? Who needs a foundation? Who needs access? Who needs a chance? Who needs to hear the story behind what was built so that they can continue on? Giving is not only about charity. Giving is this intentional impact. It may be money, but it may also be time, attention, wisdom, presence, the gift of presence. It may be giving someone an opportunity. It may be just listening in a conversation. It may be opening a door. A younger person may be developed. A family member may be strengthened. A community might be supported. A new initiative might be kicked off. A business might grow. A story might be preserved. Giving asks, what should move through me now that I've built something? That's legacy deployment. Second, live. Ask, what should what I've built make possible in my own life? What have I postponed that matters now more than ever? How do I focus on my health? Do I want to travel? Do I want to rest? Do I want to pursue new relationships? How do I find this new joy? Do I want to strengthen my faith? Are there relationships I need to repair? Do I want more time with my grandchildren? Time with friends? Time with your spouse? Time to create? Time to heal? Time to learn a new language, a new hobby, a new perspective? Is it time to be present without always being productive? Living is not selfish when it's aligned with what matters, your purpose. Some builders really struggle when they get to this point because they know how to save and they know how to protect. They know how to delay gratification, especially among baby boomers and the silent generation. They know how to grind, but they don't always know how to receive the life they work to make possible. They don't know how to step into a new season, and that can create another kind of gap. Because if everything is preserved and nothing is lived, something is off. You don't build only to guard. You built something so meaningful it should be experienced. And the third thing, steward. Ask, what should what I have built prepare, protect, and pass forward? What documents need to be in place? What stories need to be recorded on my phone? What values need to be explained in writing? What authority needs to shift practically? What decisions need to be clarified today? What property needs a plan for the future? What business needs a transition structure? What family conversation needs to happen now? What unaccustomed conversation do we have first? Who needs to be prepared, not just named? Stewardship is not hoarding. Stewardship is preparation with purpose. It's not fear-based preservation. Stewardship is responsible continuity. It's about making sure those things that continue have structure, have people knowledge, have clarity. And here's what I want you to remember. If everything is preserved and nothing is given or lived, that's not stewardship. That's stagnation. Legacy builders give. Legacy builders live. And legacy builders steward. All three matter. So, what do we do with this? Because, as I've said, awareness without action doesn't change the outcome. You don't need to redesign your entire life this week, but you do need to begin your design process. I would start with these 5 moves. 1, name what you're retiring from. What are you stepping away from? Name it. Write it. Not just the job, but the structure and the schedule and the title, the pressures of the day. What authority are you stepping away from? What identity are you giving up? What old source of relevance is being retired? The daily proof that you still matter. Some endings need to be named before they can actually be released, because unnamed endings create a hidden grief. They stay with you. And if you don't name what you're leaving, you hold on to it. You may carry it into the next chapter without realizing it. It may weight you down or prevent you from going for what you're going for. You may keep trying to recreate that old role. You may keep needing the old validation. You may keep holding on to that authority and miss the open door right in front of you. You may keep measuring your worth by a structure that no longer exists. So name it. What am I stepping away from? What am I relieved to release? And what am I grieving? What am I sad to give up? What am I afraid to lose? What part of that old role still needs honoring? And what part needs to be left behind? You can't step into the next chapter clearly if you can't name what's ending. 2, here's where you name what you're stepping into. This is the question that lots of people skip. What are you stepping into? Are you becoming a mentor? Are you becoming an advisor? Are you becoming an elder? Are you now a storyteller? Are you a connector? Are you an investor in people? Are you becoming the family convener? Are you becoming a board member? Are you becoming more creative in finding that within yourself? Are you becoming a community servant or a faith leader? You're certainly becoming a steward. Are you grandparenting with intention? Are you a founder in a new role for a new venture? Are you builders of others? The next chapter needs language. If you can't name it, you'll drift around it and you'll keep searching for it in the valley between the first and second mountain. And we're not practicing perfection. Name does not have to be perfect. It just has to give you some direction towards your God-given purpose. You may say, I'm stepping into a season of mentorship. I'm stepping into a season of repair. I'm stepping into a season of family leadership. The family needs me now. I'm stepping into a season of health and presence. I need to take care of myself. I'm stepping into a season of developing the next generation. I'm stepping into a season of telling the story. I'm writing a book. I'm stepping into a season of giving back my time, my talents. I'm stepping into a season of stewardship, preserving what's next. Language creates direction, and direction creates movement. Movement creates clarity. So 3, now that we know our give, live, and steward, let's build a give, live, steward map. Don't make it complicated. Just take one page. Draw 3 columns. A give column, a live column, and a steward column. Under give, write one person, one cause, relationship, or opportunity you will invest in and step into. Under your live column, write one health, relationship, joy, experience, learning, priority that you'll stop postponing. And under steward, write one story, asset, decision, document, or responsibility you will prepare intentionally for the future, the bridge you will build. That's it. Just start with one action in each lane and check them off when you're done. Purpose becomes clearer through movement. You don't need to have the full plan to take the next faithful step. You just have to give one thing, live one thing, and steward one thing. Then build from there. 4, design your first 90 days of stepping into. This is where that gap year idea becomes practical. Or gap few months. Not a vague year, not a beautiful journal entry that never becomes life. A first 90-day plan. What will you do in the first 90 days of this next chapter? What's the structure? What conversations will you have? Who will you reach out to? What relationship will you invest in? What story will you record? What system will you organize or reorganize? What health practice will you begin? What act of giving will you make? What meeting will you schedule that you've been putting off? What decision will you stop delaying? What rhythm will you create? What will you remove from the calendar to make space for something else? What will you finally place on the calendar that's been in waiting? The next chapter doesn't become meaningful through intention alone. It becomes meaningful through movement. Mama said, keep moving. Design the first 90 days, then learn, adjust, adapt, and keep deploying. And 5, redesign your role before life redesigns it for you. This matters especially for founders, leaders, parents, elders, people who've been in charge. You may no longer be the operator, the center, but you can be the advisor. You may no longer be the daily decision maker, but you are the developer. You may no longer be the provider in the same way, but you're the preparer. You may no longer be that person climbing the first mountain, hard charging, but you can help others climb their first mountain with more wisdom. You may no longer need to be the center, but you can still be the source. There's a different role, but it's not a lesser role. The goal is not to withdraw. The goal is not to disappear, to retire. The goal is to step into a role that fits your new season. And if you don't redesign your role, life may redesign it for you. Through health, through age, through family needs and finances and changes in the economy, through business changes, through loss, through urgency. Legacy design says, let's not wait for urgency to assign the role. Let's design the role while we still have options, while we're still in charge. Let me pause here for a moment. If this conversation has you asking, what is the next chapter supposed to make possible? That's a signal. And this is exactly why we're building Francis Legacy Bridge Partners and the Legacy Deployment Reflection. The Legacy Deployment Reflection is designed to help you think through: what are you called to give? How are you called to live? And what are you called to steward? It's not about having every answer. That's not what the reflection is for. It's about starting with better questions. Because the next step is not panic. The next step is clarity. And if you're approaching retirement, if you're thinking about stepping away from a role, navigating a leadership transition, or already in a season that feels more like drift than design, reach out through the information in the show notes. We'd be happy to begin a conversation to help you think about stepping into. Now, let's bring this all home. When the next chapter is designed, retirement doesn't have to become drift. Resources can move with intention. Wisdom transfers early. Relationships can deepen. Stories get preserved. Families receive the context they need. Founders find new roles of meaning and purpose. Elders stay meaningfully engaged. The next generation receives so much more than assets. They receive preparation. And legacy becomes active, not eventual. And that's the work. Because legacy is not the afterlife of success. It's the active deployment of what you've built. It is what you put into motion while you're still here. It is the wisdom you share, the people you prepare, the stories you preserve. It's the resources you deploy and the roles you redesign. It's the relationships that you strengthen. And it's the faith that you live. The dignity you protect, the future you make possible for yourself and others. So no, I don't think retirement should mean withdrawal. Not for legacy builders. Not for people who still have wisdom to share. Not for founders who built something worth continuing. Not for parents and grandparents whose stories matter today more than ever, because what they went through built something. Not for leaders whose judgment was formed over decades. Not for families trying to move from legacy by default to legacy by design to create generational influence, generational impact, and generational wealth. You may retire from a role. You may withdraw. You do not retire from purpose. You may step away from the old structure, but you can step into a new assignment. You've scaled the first mountain, but the second mountain is still calling. And the question is not just, what am I stepping away from? The better question is, what am I stepping into? Give, live, steward. Purpose, experience, and continuity. Those are the things that take precedence as you roll through the second part. That's legacy deployment. That's legacy by design. So I want to thank you for the time that you've granted me. I never take it lightly. Legacy may begin by default, but legacy thrives by design. If this conversation stirred something in you, please share it, like it, subscribe, help the message get out about what we're stepping into. Someone may truly need it. Take a step forward toward the clarity your family, your future, and your legacy deserves. Again, inheritance may begin by default. Legacy requires design. I'm Garrick Francis. God bless.